All right, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you join us today for the Environmental Policy 101 on conservation. This is the second in our series. My name is Chelsea Biggs. I'm the Chief of Staff at IEC. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Lindsay Keeney, our Conservation Director, and Sergio Vargas, our IEC Conservation or Chicagoland Conservation Manager. They're going to give you the bulk of the presentation today, but I'm just going to kick us off and then I'll help facilitate a conversation and Q&A at the end. You can hit the next slide. So our agenda for today, I'm going to talk a little bit about IEC, who we are and what we do to sort of ground us in our conversation. Then Lindsay and Sergio are going to take over. They're going to walk you through a lay of the land of conservation in Illinois. So an overview of our work, of the work of conservation in Illinois, the who's who. Then we'll walk through a 101 on the issues and solutions that we see for supporting conservation in our state. Then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. I will note, if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put those in the chat. We may not stop the presentation and ask the questions as they're happening so that we can make sure we have that 15 minutes at the end to go through questions. We are recording the webinar, so you'll all get a copy of that at the end as well. IEC, we've been around since 1975. We've really grown substantially in the last 10 years, so our work looks a little different than it did a few years back. We represent more than 150 environmental organizations around the state, a few hundred individuals as members of IEC as well, and our mission is to advance equitable public policies that create healthy environments across the state. We do that through collaboration, power building, and advocacy. So we focus on 6 issue areas at IEC for the environment. We have sustainable agriculture, conservation, clean energy, equitable transportation, clean water, and zero waste. As you would guess, all of these things intersect and intertwine. So we'll talk a lot about conservation today, but we'll touch on some of these other items as well, because we really see conservation as a solution to a lot of these problems. Our approach, as I mentioned, coalition building, we do legislator education as a means to help build power, and we do policy advocacy in Springfield, Chicago, and sometimes in DC. So what we do, trying to really bullet it out for people to drive home the point here, we advance sound environmental laws and policies at all levels of government. We build coalitions to influence decision makers. We do education with decision makers, mostly through our conservation work, and it's really getting people in powerful decision-making positions out in nature and understanding the power of what we have available in our state and the importance of protecting it. We coordinate our affiliate members to share resources, mobilize support, and quickly respond to pressing issues. And finally, we create and build a consensus around our annual environmental agenda. You're good. So digging a little bit into our affiliates. So we have as I mentioned, more than 150 organizations that are members of IEC. They vary in geographic scope, size, and issue area. So we bring on anyone who's an organization focused on supporting the environment, in a nonprofit capacity as an affiliate member of our organization. We have the list of those available on our website. I'm happy to share that out in a follow-up. IEC also has a community council as a way to bring in the voices of smaller organizations that are community-based or place-based and predominantly volunteer-led. Many of these organizations don't have the financial ability to join IEC as a full affiliate. But we know and need their voices at the table. We know that they're important. So we've developed a community council as a way to engage and connect with them. We have quarterly meetings, and we are in the process of bringing on our community council as full affiliate members without cost. Looking at the benefits of IEC, we, as affiliates of IEC, we really act as a trade association for most organizations, really supporting their legislative work. So ultimately, we're helping them pass legislation in their areas of interest, and we pass legislation with their feedback. So we support in navigating and understanding the process of passing bills in Springfield, and helping them understand the stakeholders and the folks that they need to be engaging with to help build that power around those issues. We support with bill drafting and finding sponsors for their bills, as well as our own bills that they're working on with us. So additional benefits for IEC members, everyone's connected with a policy expert on our team. So those 6 issue areas I mentioned earlier on, we have staff that specialize in all of these areas available for our affiliates to connect with and work closely with. We do movement building, which is really what I've spent the bulk of the time talking about so far. We track all bills with a legislative angle throughout session. So this year we have more than 400 bills that we're tracking and monitoring and providing updates on a weekly basis to our affiliate members. We have office spaces in Chicago and Springfield available for our affiliates to drop in. So if you're in Springfield and you need a break, you need to come, get on some Wi-Fi, eat some snacks, connect with some people, we're available there. And we also upgraded our space in Chicago to have a similar kind of connection point for our affiliates. We have really wonderful comm support. So we love to highlight our affiliates in our newsletters and our social media. And then we also do a lot of work around publicizing or putting out our publications around scorecards and that sort of thing. But the last thing that I think is the most important part of our affiliate membership is that they are a huge part of forming our policy agenda. So we work with our affiliates throughout the year, throughout the summer and the fall, mostly to help us understand what issues we need to be focused on. They review and vote on to approve our policy agenda going into each year of session. So, I'm happy to talk at the end about our affiliate program, our community council. If you're interested in joining, if you're not already an affiliate, would love to talk to you about those benefits. We'll also talk a little bit about the benefits of an individual membership at the end as well. But for what we're actually here to talk about today, I want to give you a heads up on our 101s. So, earlier this year, it was actually an article written about our conservation team that sparked this idea. We had a member of our board that wasn't as familiar with the work we were doing in conservation because they're mostly in the energy space. And we realized it would be a great opportunity to step back for our affiliates, our members, our volunteers to really dive into all of our 6 issue areas and make sure folks understand, the needs in these areas and how we're working on them. So that's what brought us here today. Lindsay and Sergio will take over and talk a little bit more about our work in conservation.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. I am Lindsay Keeney. I'm our conservation director. I've been with the Illinois Environmental Council for almost 9 years. I work out of our Springfield office. So like Chelsea said, if you're ever around, please drop in, distract me from our regular work, come hang out. We love having our affiliates in Springfield and visiting. This is our Conservation 101. So Sergio is our Chicagoland Conservation Manager. He's going to help me tag team this. I will admit up front that I think that the Conservation 101 could be a 10-hour series, but we are going to get it done in one. But I'm watching those of you who are popping in the waiting room and hopping on. I will reiterate that I could talk about conservation all day long. I think it's some of the coolest work. I tease our other staff that I have the best job. I get to work with the land trusts and the conservation folks and the sportsmen. But you guys are the real experts. I'm seeing the folks popping on and definitely feeling like they are the experts that are here to listen to 101. So looking forward to our Q&A at the end. This next slide is getting into the lay of the land of conservation, and it's a lot, right? This is like a historic state for conservation. Illinois has passed landmark conservation pieces. So I'm gonna get through it. I'm gonna talk a lot on this slide, and then the rest are gonna be a little more balanced. And then I might cut this one a little short, and we can talk more about the pieces of 30 by 30 and the Illinois is Beautiful plan and how those pieces intersect maybe in the question and answers if folks want to do some follow-up. But to jump in here, to start at the sort of the global scale for context, 3/4 of all land on Earth and 2/3 of all the water on Earth has been altered by humans. So that baseline is, why is conservation important? Because we've already changed the landscape so much. So back in January of 2021, this huge group of scientists came together from legendary institutions. They all got together and released a paper that really tackled bringing awareness to the issues of climate change and the biodiversity crisis. We call those the twin crises. They issued this paper. It was a stark warning about how humanity is the cause of a rapid loss of biodiversity and climate change, and with that, Earth's ability to support complex life. They said the science is strong here, the awareness is weak, and put it out as a challenge. What are the people of the planet Earth going to do about it? And it was not a recommendation to just save nature because we enjoy being outside and it's beautiful, though those are really important pieces. The report made clear the links between the biodiversity crisis and nature and things like food security and clean water. And those were not just in poor countries, those were in all countries across the globe. So that paper, alongside other big publications and research and the Paris Agreement, really reinforced the urgency for the Convention on Biological Diversity to push forward an ambitious and transformative strategy to curb global biodiversity loss. So that is the background of how this like 30 by 30 thing that you hear all the time came about. And it was really an interim step to saving 50% of the planet by 2050, which is a very old idea in conservation as a way to prevent climate change or mitigate climate change and prevent the biodiversity crisis. So that's all the background. And then this idea of 30 by 30 as an interim step really took off, and tons of countries started passing laws, making commitments. And as usual, the US was like last to the party. The Biden campaign campaigned on a 30 by 30 commitment and a commitment to nature. And from that came, after Joe Biden was elected, from that came the America the Beautiful campaign plan, which is our nation's 30 by 30 commitment. And that has really, the America the Beautiful campaign commitment does not have a lot of teeth, does not have a whole lot of fleshed out guidance for the states, which is where we got to come in. It was kind of nice that it wasn't a lot, but we would like there to be some more guidance there. But it is the umbrella that a lot of national conservation campaigns and efforts are aligned under. So you'll see the America the Beautiful funding opportunities come across, and a lot of the work out west that we're doing in the country with the Bureau of Land Management is all under that America the Beautiful umbrella, which really refers to the 30 by 30 commitment to save nature. So that's the history of how we got to 30 by 30. In Illinois, we are organizing under Illinois is Beautiful as a reference to the America the Beautiful campaign. And this slide has my very favorite, if you ever come to my presentations, I use this picture a lot. These are the 14 natural divisions of the state of Illinois. So we've got everything from the driftless up north down to the Shawnee National Forest, the cypress swamps. Our state is so unbelievably cool, diverse, and beautiful. It's 400 miles long. We have, I think, just one less natural division than California. We have the second of all states. We just have a very, very cool state for those of us that are kind of stuck in the center in corn and soybean land. It's very cool to remember all of the natural areas and divisions that we have in Illinois that are worth protecting. So go back a little bit, the nature crisis at a US scale is big. We are we've lost 24 million acres of natural area since 2001, and that comes to a football field of natural area every 30 seconds. It's horrendous. Only 12% of US land is already protected. We're shooting for 30, right? So we're at 12, and half of that is in Alaska. So not doing great at a US scale. At the Illinois scale, we're doing even worse. So we've got 4% in traditionally protected protections, and 75% of our land is in agriculture. And unfortunately, we only grow 4% of the food that we consume in the state. So the majority of that agriculture is row crop, corn, soybeans. Another piece is that 90% of our state is privately owned. So incentivizing privately owned conservation is going to be a huge part of our work here. And we are very far down along the bottom in public land ownership. Our state has lost more than 99% of its original open prairie and 95% of its wetlands. I'll talk a lot about prairie and wetlands today. But so that is where we stand. Some more very cool things about our state are that we have 58 mammal species, 383 birds, a ton of reptiles and amphibians, 174 species of freshwater fish, tons of insects, mussels, and vertebrates. We have a very cool state. I cannot tell you that anymore, but now I'm going to walk us through, and that's the longest slide. That's the most that I have to tell you. But I
There
will
were
now.
actually two
Yeah,
really
go ahead.
good questions that came up that I think are
Yes,
valuable for
please.
this slide. So I'm going to say both of them. How does land become protected, and why natural divisions versus ecoregions?
I do not know the answer to ecoregions. I don't know the difference between natural divisions and ecoregions, but I'd be very interested to learn. This comes from DNR. They put out the poster that divides them up into natural divisions. But how does land become protected? Super cool. There's like dozens of ways to do that, all the way from establishing a property as a nature preserve. There's land and water reserves. There's lots of private land conservation that we can do on our individual properties that are protecting different pieces of the ecosystem. And we're going to walk through different parts of that. But I also saw Amy Dahl on. She's with Friends of the Illinois Nature Preserve System. I'm sure she would love to tell you anytime about how to protect land. But okay, so I'm going to let Sergio talk us through who the players are, who the stakeholders are in conservation. And I'm also going to say hello to a lot of you because I've seen a lot of you pop on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Sergio Vargas. I'm the Chicagoland Conservation Manager here in the Chicago office at the Illinois Environmental Council. And as Lindsay had mentioned, a fraction of land is protected in the state of Illinois. So it's really critical to understand who are the stakeholders in our state, what are their roles, how can we support them, and generally, how do we ensure that we can continue to conserve and protect additional land and water in the state of Illinois. So quickly going over some of the biggest stakeholders, we have park districts, and there are more than 360 park districts in the state of Illinois. They play a crucial role in providing recreational and conservation services at the local level, which really connects many communities and people to nature in spaces that are very close to their homes, which is really important to educate folks about the importance of nature and continuing to connect them with nature so that they feel connected and have a sense of responsibility for the protection of nature in general. And next, we have forest preserve districts. There are 14 forest preserve districts within the state. And these districts are dedicated to preserving and restoring natural areas and wildlife habitats. And they also provide the same or similar opportunities for public enjoyment and education about nature and conservation in the state as well. We also have conservation districts, and there are 5 within the state. And these conservation districts are intended to acquire, preserve, and maintain, both wildland, open land, scenic roadways, and other pathways, and to continue education efforts and coordinate recreation that the public can enjoy as well. Land trusts, as Lindsay had also mentioned, are also incredibly important. There are approximately 25 nonprofit conservation land trusts serving areas throughout the state of Illinois, and their primary tool to acquire land is through real estate transactions. And again, as Lindsay had mentioned, this is going to be an incredibly important tool and mechanism to highlight and incentivize to ensure that we can continue to protect more land in the state. And then some other groups that folks might not know about are these sportsman groups like Ducks Unlimited or Pheasants Forever that play a really crucial role and at times align with our conservation efforts. For example, hunters are supportive of protected areas for wildlife and reestablishing populations, and are also supportive of maintaining habitat and protected areas in general. And then the Illinois Farm Bureau is an extremely powerful group because of their size. They're controlled by farmers who join the Bureau through their county farm bureau, of which there are 95 in Illinois. And they have over 250,000 members statewide. So they're largely represented, very, very strong presence. So it's really important that we coordinate with all of these groups, all of these land management agencies to see where there is room for alignment, collaboration, and cooperation to incentivize new policy or legislative action to continue to protect land in the state.
All right, so we have 3 big issues for conservation. I think I thought of dozens, but these are the buckets that we place them in. So we have a lack of state investment in natural areas. We'll dig into that one in a minute, but any of you who have been around in Illinois for more than 5 minutes know that it has been a roller coaster of natural area and conservation investment from the state. The second issue is unprotected open space. How do we dedicate and protect more open space? And the third one is wildlife and habitat preservation and sort of some of the specific threats to ecosystems, wildlife and habitat. This first one is that lack of state investment in natural areas. And many of you know it has been a roller coaster. So open space is a really easy spot, a popular place for budget cuts. We have seen the lowest of lows and we're starting to see some highs again. Many of you probably remember Governor Blagojevich's proposal to take a holiday from funding open space acquisition. We've seen cuts to DNR, budget, staffing. I think DNR a few years ago was at half capacity that it had been in the 90s. We've seen cuts to the Open Space Land Acquisition and Development Fund, Natural Areas Acquisition Funds, that's OSLAD and NAF. There is $720 million in delayed capital needs at state parks and DNR properties. This is a fun time to give this presentation because there's some good news around agency capacity and budget increases, and we're starting to see them chip away at those delayed capital projects. And then I will just take a minute to say that fund sweeps have been especially horrible for us in the conservation space as we watched our budgets zeroed out in the times of unbalanced budgets and budget impasse here in Illinois. And all of these pieces definitely affected the agency's capacity to administer programs. So we talked about how IDNR had been at half capacity, and then some of our really important programs like CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, was totally eliminated. I do have, once again, it's a good time to give this presentation because it was restarted, I think, last year after a 6-year hiatus. And we're seeing positive headcount and budget increases for DNR. Key positions at CREP, at INPC have been filled, and they're really starting to restore staffing levels, and that will continue to be a key priority for IEC and our conservation partners going forward, is making sure that we restore staffing levels and fully fund the department going forward, because we need agency staff to implement our programs and our work. Sergio, I think you're going to handle this one.
Yeah. We've hosted a number of listening sessions with different communities, over the past couple of years, And in the past year, specifically, we've continued to hear this need and desire for equitable outdoor access. And so this is one of the biggest issues that we continue to see with communities in regard to accessing and enjoying natural areas. So inequitable outdoor access continues to be one of the biggest barriers that many communities face when wanting to engage and connect with nature. And so it's our position that every Illinois citizen should have access to green space, and that access should not be hindered by distance or feelings of unsafety. And that can look like many different things, right? Perhaps an individual might be able to bike to a nearby natural area, but perhaps they have to cross heavy traffic, right? And so families or parents might not be comfortable with letting their kid, regardless of their age, taking that what they perceive to be a pretty big risk, and what is a pretty big risk, to cross heavy traffic to enjoy these natural spaces. So that could be very limiting for a lot of youth in the area and families in general. Park districts with populations of less than 5,000 individuals or people are least likely to have natural areas in proximity to their home, and 25% of responding park districts indicate that they held 0 acres of natural areas. So we continue to see this issue become more vocalized by communities, especially as communities become more aware of conservation efforts, through our work, and want to explore better methods of transportation or better methods to connect these communities to natural spaces near them with regard to these health and safety issues.
So why should you invest? Why should we encourage our state to invest in open space? There's important reasons to reverse the state's trend of underfunding, and we know all these reasons, right? Investing in open space is an investment in clean water and clean air, flood control, economic activity, job growth, tourism, sporting goods, and it boosts property values, right? So we all have our individual reasons for why an investment in natural areas would benefit us, but it also benefits our communities. And all of these nature-based solutions are implemented through conservation. So wetlands help us mitigate flooding issues. Implementing cover crops and conservation practices on ag land help our soil health and reduce nutrient loss into the Gulf. So we cannot overstate the benefits of nature-based solutions. Our recreation economy generates $25.8 billion each year and sustains 200,000 jobs in Illinois. So one solution to this is one of my favorite ones to talk about, is getting a dedicated source of state revenue for conservation and open space protection in Illinois. When we have to put all these qualifiers in, right? We need a permanent, adequate, and unsweepable source of land protection and restoration funds. Ideally, that would also fund stewardship, because that's the other side of the coin here in conservation. We can't just protect land, we have to actively take care of it. And so with a reliable source of funds, our government could establish meaningful conservation priorities. They could meet the commitments they've already made in various state plans and strategies. We could make sure that those valuable resources are equitably distributed and meet those statewide goals, like the Illinois Water Plan, the Wildlife Action Plan, the Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy, these commitments that we've already put forward. And it's also a lot easier to secure federal funding when we have some matching dollars to put up, or a pool to pull from. So this is a priority for IEC and for our conservation partners. And another priority is restoring staffing levels, fully funding the Department of Natural Resources. We think that significant open space projects should be part of every capital bill passed by the General Assembly. And the best part of all of this, like I said, I tease my coworkers all the time, my work is so well supported, right? So conservation is, and clean water routinely polls so high, it's bipartisan. People are fans of this work. They see it, it's easy to see the value with some education. So it's usually an easy conversation to point people to why this is important. 60% of Illinois voters support paying more in property taxes to acquire open space and trails. And Illinois voters have approved over 50 measures for land conservation since 1998. So this is well-supported initiative. An additional solution and very related is sustainable revenue mechanisms. And I think Sergio is going to talk us through some of the successes we've seen with the referendums.
Yeah, when I joined IEC, I had the opportunity to participate in the steering committee for this Vote Yes referendum that was being campaigned in Cook County. And this was a direct ballot initiative that aimed to provide a historic investment in the Forest Preserve District of Cook County to advance their next century conservation plan that outlines different mechanisms and plans to support clean air, clean water, and wildlife protection. And so there were many different polls and studies done in preparation for this campaign to really understand what tax increase voters would be willing to absorb in exchange for funding to go towards the Forest Preserve District. And this funding mechanism, which was through a 0.025% increase in the property tax limiting rate, generated $42 million a year, totaling $1 billion over 25 years, which is one of the largest conservation referendums, not just in the state, but in the United States. And this tax impact would be estimated at about $20 a year or $1.66 a month for the average taxpayer, which was well below the threshold that taxpayers were willing to absorb. And so we can see the massive support is reflected in the numbers that this measure passed with. So the Vote Yes referendum passed with a 69 to 31% margin, which is really, unseen with many direct ballot initiatives. So this was a massive victory here, and it exceeded the 50% plus one required threshold to pass. And we saw higher support in the city and county, both at numbers of 3-to-1 and 2-to-1. And this was a really massive reflection of the public demand for conservation within the Forest Preserve District and these overarching goals to continue and protect nature. And one of the biggest points that we've continued to outline is the fact that this referendum received majority support in every township and ward, even in the most conservative areas, with up to 90% support in some. So again, this just continues to emphasize the public demand for these initiatives and direct ballot initiatives as well. So it continues to bode well for future conservation referendums and direct ballot initiatives.
Thanks, Sergio. And so with the, if we could fund state investment and we could get some additional referendums perhaps happening, that would be a bite out of the work that we have to do. But with 90% of our land privately owned, we are not a state out west where we have 60% public land. We have to prioritize private land conservation. In Illinois, we have a really great system for that, where we have these very cool things called conservation land trusts. Prairie State Conservation Coalition is the coalition that supports those land trusts. But all over our state, we have these nonprofit organizations that work really hard to, traditionally they work to protect the land, restore it, and then they would transfer it to government entities for long-term ownership. That protect, restore, transfer model is definitely still practiced, but was a little bit more difficult to do in the years that our state was not purchasing land, was not doing any acquisition. So in a fluke of conservation, those land trusts have had to become really good stewards of the land. Illinois is kind of leading in that space too, in that we had to become, our land trusts are really leading the way and becoming models of stewardship. So we have these fantastic land trusts, and then we also have folks in their own backyards on their own property looking for programs and pieces that we can put in place to help them protect and conserve their own land. So one of these things that we worked on was the Natural Area Stewardship Act. We worked to make sure that those land trusts had funding and some investment, some help with all this stewardship work. Because if the state's not going to do it, if we don't have a lot of federal protected land. We got the Shawnee down south, but if we're going to leave this up to the land trust, we need to make sure that they had some resources to provide stewardship. So that was one of our initiatives a few years ago. It's a grant program through the Department of Natural Resources. It's going strong. We continue to advocate to make sure that it grows and we can get that money out the door to the land trusts doing the work. Another priority is fully funding any incentive programs like that. So we have CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. We have fall covers for spring savings. As those incentive programs are conceived and passed and implemented, we want to make sure that we get them appropriated and then the next year. And some of these are battles we have to fight every single year during budgets and appropriation to make sure that our conservation partners have the resources that they need to do the work that we need them to do. And I am going to pick this up a little bit because I think we have about 10 minutes left and a couple more to get to. So one of the solutions that a lot of our partners are working on is working to make sure that tax incentives for conservation are at least as good as they are for agriculture. Right now, they're not. Land and water reserves are assessed at 8.3%, and ag land is assessed at 5%. So incentivizing, it would be easy to incentivize permanent protection through a tax incentive. Another solution is getting people to fall in love with nature, right? We want to make sure that they have access to outdoor recreation and open space. Some of the things we're working on in that arena are clarifying river access. Here in Illinois, there is a misrepresentation of the law, and we want to make sure that we clarify that existing law and affirm that citizens have the right to recreate on Illinois rivers and streams. There's a really cool piece of the Open Space Land Acquisition and Development Fund that we've been working on that we'd like to see portions of that acquisition money set aside for distressed locations. So communities that may not have a grant writer, may not be the traditional recipients of these funds. So we'd like to see some of that set aside and then also the matching requirement waived. So some of these solutions that I'm getting into are bills at the State House this year or initiatives that are coming up. And we can, if you follow along and join our newsletters, you can receive all the information for bill numbers and advocacy and how to contact your legislator and what the next steps are on each of these pieces. But the second issue, the second big bucket of issues is unprotected open space. So if we're going to get to that 30%, we need to protect more of this open space. And there are quite a few issues with that. If that's our goal, we're up against a few issues. There are rollbacks of federal protections. Right now, the big one is wetlands, right? There was an unfavorable Supreme Court decision leaving wetlands vulnerable. So that's a big piece of our work. We want to prioritize INAI sites for acquisition and protection. INAI is the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory, a big list of all the best, coolest, most valuable ecosystems in the state. We want to make sure that if we have acquisition dollars that we're prioritizing them and using them strategically. And then we want to make sure that we are addressing consultation weaknesses and process failures at the agency level. So a lot of our big advocacy pieces that we've worked on in the last few years, specifically Bell Prairie, but also other local projects, come up against, like, if a developer would like to build somewhere, they have to go through a consultation process with the department. And sometimes it doesn't work perfectly, and we want to make sure that it does. So there's a lot of work to do around addressing the weaknesses and process failures at that level. So the wetlands piece, this is big. This is my favorite work right now. Unfavorable Supreme Court decision. It's called the Sackett decision, and it resulted in a rollback of Clean Water Act and left wetlands in Illinois and a lot of other states vulnerable. We've been working at the State House. We've been working to build a coalition. Many of you all are involved in the coalition. This first picture is from a press conference. This other picture is, I think, Jen and I and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, many of you partners, and some legislators down in the Shawnee National Forest on the Cache River, canoeing on a wetland and showing legislators why it's important to protect them. So this work is happening right now. Contact your legislators, ask them to be co-sponsors of the wetlands bill. And then I think we are on big issue number 3, which, Sergio, do you want to take the lead here?
Yeah, absolutely. And so our outline big issue number 3 is wildlife and habitat preservation, to ensure that healthy ecosystems continue to be as resilient as possible in the face of climate change and ongoing issues. So guarding against invasives continues to be one of the largest issues that land management agencies face. I think the biggest cost for land management agencies is related to invasive species removal. So it continues to be a massive hurdle that these agencies have to face, and continue to figure out solutions to mitigate different issues that we see, which could be buckthorn or particular fish species or whatever it may be, making it easier for these land management agencies to continue to do that important work to protect and preserve those habitats. We also want to prioritize the connectivity of habitats through dam removals or ensuring that there are strong wildlife corridors, as well as protecting wetlands that are critical for a number of reasons that we've outlined previously, and then restricting floodplain development as well. And this last piece is especially important, protecting against herbicide and pesticide damage, because we have seen a lot of damage to flora and fauna as a result of uncontrolled herbicide and pesticide use.
Thanks, Sergio. And then I'm going to get us through some of these solutions kind of rapid fire so that we have time to chit chat here at the end. So this one is, it would be really great if the Department of Natural Resources could add species to the Exotic Weed Act without going through statute. So that is a solution that we see and we're working on. We also have some barriers to stewardship, like the difficulty of practitioners to perform prescribed fire because of liability issues. So we really want to clear some of that red tape for them. In the same vein, there is a pesticide applicator license that is really geared toward agriculture applicators. And you have to take this huge test that is full of row crop specific questions. And we'd like to see a conservation specific one so that that education is more tailored towards the practitioner's actual use. And then one of our biggest pieces of work, but something we can't really talk about before it happens, is being ready to defend against all of the things that pop up. So this year, we're really defending against turtle trapping and expanding the taking of turtles, which are a species that take a long time to mature, a long time to reach sexual maturity and reproduce. So we don't see any taking of them as a great idea. I will always thank our experts, our shed aquarium herpetologists, our Peggy Notebart folks that pop in and make sure that we have the best experts in the room when we give testimony here or negotiate and talk on these bills. So it's really great to have all of our conservation partners linked into these issues, and you're always ready to sort of spring into attack when these things come up. Another example is the Endangered Species Protection Board. From a few years ago, there was a bill up to add farm industry members to that board, which we saw as a threat to endangered species, and you all jumped on to help defend that as well. So this is a humongous piece, and you all do a great job of getting activated and staying educated and hopping in when we need you. This last piece, this is a solution that we see as complete herbicide and pesticide application reform. Cannot overstate the scale of the issues we are seeing in natural areas because of pesticide and herbicide damage. Prairie Rivers Network has identified symptoms on 188 species. So there's across herbaceous plants, trees, shrubs, woody vines, in rural towns, in cities, in neighborhoods, suburbs, everywhere you can see it. And these are in non-resistant crops, specialty crops, native plants, wide variety, public-private lands. It's everywhere. So they suspect vapor drift to be the primary cause. And this is such a huge issue. And I would like to say that's an emerging issue, but it's not. It's one that we've known about for a while, and it's really time to act on. The Illinois Pesticide Act is not set up to account for damages to natural areas, and this is the part where I'm going to kick the can a little bit to Elliot, who will be doing our ag presentation, and he'll be doing a one-on-one in a few months, and he's really going to dive into the solutions for this piece. And then I want to plug that we are having Conservation Day at the Capitol on April 30th. I hope to see you all there. You can find all the information on our website and register. And we did it. We made it to Q&A only 5 minutes past time.
We did it. Good job. That was incredibly helpful. So I want to encourage anyone who has questions to throw them in the chat while we're waiting. I did share some information on IEC membership in the chat. I'm happy to talk more about it. You know, at the beginning, I talked a lot about organizational involvement. You as an individual can get involved as well. There's an option to become a paying member. It's a minimum contribution of, I think, $50 a year. If you can't give 50 and want to give less, of course that would be great, and we'll keep you on as a member as well. Right now, if you give $50, you get a cool park poster, similar to the one behind Lindsay. And if financial contributions isn't something that you can do, or if it's something you're not interested in, also joining our email list and joining in on action alerts, or being aware of what's going on and being an advocate in that way is also extremely valuable. So there are a couple options for engagement there. What does being an individual member entail? It's a great question. So our members get information sooner than other folks. So when we put out our scorecard every year, it goes to our members first. So you get some of that information first. You get email communications early on about things like these webinars and other lunch and learns. We have some members only webinars and events, and that kind of thing. So it's a way to stay engaged and be a financial contributor to the work that we do. All right. How do you coordinate water conservation with your water group? Speak to that, Lindsay.
Sure. So a lot of my work, I'm our conservation director. A lot of Sergio's work as Chicagoland conservation manager dovetails right into the water work. So we work on nutrient loss reduction strategy, work Mississippi River protection. And then we also work closely with our staff. Ayana works out of Chicago, who leads some of our water work. And Angela leads some of our federal work and works on our water pieces. But I don't know that we have a specific water coalition, just because that work is so embedded in our Healthy Soils, Healthy Waters coalition and our Illinois is Beautiful coalition. So it's all in the same pot of work.
And I'd say our coalitions sort of pop up as needs arise. So when the wetlands decision was made at the Supreme Court level, IEC rallied around that and pulled in key partners around the state to take action to resolve that. That's a good question. Do you have other questions here from folks? Do you ever tangle with coal mines over the damage they do to our land?
We sure do. I don't know if Jen's on, but that's definitely been part of our work in the past in working to protect especially water resources from the damage of old coal mines, and rehabilitate those properties.
Yeah, Lindsay really covered it. We do have done a lot on the abandoned mine land funding. And I think there are pieces with like the Banner Mine settlement notification. We've been trying to change those rules on notification and process for coal mines for quite a while. But you know, we were the first state to ever have a surface mine reclamation act. Still not perfect, but we did that before other states did, so at least there's a little bit there.
I don't see other questions coming. Oh, how does private conservation get funded?
Yeah, there's a few ways. So we can fund private conservation through the state budget. We can have grant programs that go out to land trusts, that go out to people doing backyard conservation. And then there's plenty of other mechanisms. There's foundations that step in, or land trusts that are raising their own money to run their own programs around conservation. So a patchwork of funding mechanisms.
It's a great
Is this
question.
public funding? Does the public get benefits? Yes, yeah. So all of our conservation work, anytime there's native plants on the landscape, you're mitigating carbon, you're contributing to cleaner water, you're cleaning the air that we're breathing. All benefits that we all get. Not to mention like the mental health benefits of getting to go outside and see green space and native plants.
Do you want to dig into one of the questions that were earlier on, and like what is the process for protecting land? So if you had acreage and you wanted to protect it, I know that there are a few ways to do that, but did you want to talk about that process overall?
Not an expert here, but you will want to get a hold of the fantastic people over at the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission, and they will walk you through the process of getting your land evaluated, thinking about if it's an INAI site. Is it a high priority for acquisition for the state because it's a wildlife corridor, the missing puzzle piece of a wildlife corridor? Like, why? What is its value? How do we capture it? And then what are the options based on the value? So a land and water reserve is a category that is not as protected as a nature preserve. It may not have been something that, you know, we've been dying as conservationists to protect, but it is still a high level of conservation, and there's still tax benefits to that. So that might be an option. And then you can always talk to the land trusts that I speak so highly of, because they work to acquire and protect and steward land. So if you can find out your local land trust and get a hold of them, they are experts and fantastic resources towards working towards protecting land.
Well, I have a question. So as an individual, if I wanted to go start to be active in conservation in the state of Illinois, doing like seed collection or field restoration, what is my first step? Like, how do I do that?
Yeah, getting involved with a local land trust is fantastic. They have volunteer days where they're working on properties that are nearby, close to you, that you might have public access to. So you really get to feel a sense of ownership and volunteering and working on those pieces. Chris is putting up the Land Trust Alliance Land Trust Directory, so you can find a local one. You can also talk to the Department of Natural Resources, look into friends organizations of your local state parks. Yeah, that's where I would start. And any of our partners, like, you can look into who our affiliates are, conservation partners, the Nature Conservancy, Open Lands, all of our favorite folks have backyard programs, they have resources, they have your first step for becoming a volunteer. So all of our affiliates are the right place to start.
And Lindsay, what are you most proud of that you've done at IEC to support conservation in Illinois? If it's a bill or
You
some
prepped me for that question.
sorry.
On the spot. I'm super proud of our Natural Area Stewardship Act work. So that is a grant program that fills the gap in stewardship for land trusts that are working. They've protected the land, and we talked about all of those threats that open space is up against: invasives, development, all of the threats and pressures, and we're providing money in hand to do the stewardship projects that need done. So that whether that's prescribed fire, invasive species removal, restoration, seed planting, whatever it is, we've directed funds from your tax dollars to those land trusts who are doing the stewardship work.
Great. I heard something about a monarch license plate. If somebody wanted to support monarchs and maybe get a license plate that shows off their commitment, how would they do that?
Yeah,
And
so
what
this might be Jen's proudest moment, or it's at least her like longest hard won moment. But we have worked on a monarch license plate for years. And it is happening. You can contact the Secretary of State and get your monarch license plate, and your license plate fee will be directed to implementing monarch habitat in the state of Illinois. And you can show off that commitment on the back of your car.
Very cool. We have 1 minute left. James wrote in the chat, I want to encourage picking up volunteer lake management program as a way to leverage state resources for lake and watershed protection. Would like someone to contact me concerning the issue. So thank you, James.
Yeah, James, thank you. And we are working with the EPA on some of the programs that they have let go, and making sure that they have resources to continue their work.
Perfect. Well, we're at time. I want to thank everyone for joining, and thank you, Lindsay and Sergio, for such an engaging presentation. If you need us, you've got our contact information. We'll follow up with the slides, so you have that and the recording. And don't be a stranger. Stay in touch.
Thanks.
Thank you.